So the Bible is a collection of ancient books that work together to tell the story of a God who loves people and wants to be with them. It all points to Jesus, the hero. And since September, we've been reading through the library of Scripture, and now we've come to the books that tell us about Jesus' life on earth. And we're going to read this morning a parable that Jesus told to reset our assumptions about who is lost and how God feels about them. So to set this up, Jesus' biographer, Luke, named two groups of people that were in the crowds gathered around Jesus listening to him teach. There were the rule breakers. Luke called them the sinners and tax collectors. So sinners were people who had disobeyed God's law. Tax collectors took it a step further, and they actually collaborated with Rome to exploit God's people. Sinners and tax collectors, they were the religious outcasts in the crowd. Also in the crowds were the rule keepers, and these were the religious leaders called Pharisees and teachers of the law. And these people were devoted to knowing God's law and to obeying it perfectly. And they believed that their obedience and their goodness would earn God's approval, so he would finally bless them and overcome the Romans for them. And so the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were the religious role models in the crowd. And Luke tells us that the rule-keeping Pharisees were concerned because Jesus welcomed everyone at his table, including the sinners. In that culture, eating together signified acceptance, even approval. And so the Pharisees wondered, what was a religious teacher like Jesus doing eating with sinners and tax collectors? Why wasn't he joining the rule-keeping group instead and keeping those spiritual outcasts at a distance? And so Jesus heard the Pharisees muttering, and he responded with three stories, each about something that was precious, that was lost, found, sought, and found. So a shepherd lost one of 100 sheep. He left 99, hunted for it until he found it, and then had a party to celebrate. A woman lost one of 10 valuable coins. She turned the house upside down until she found it, and then had a party to celebrate. We all know what it's like to recover something that's been lost, no matter how small it is. I remember being in a foreign airport once. I was about to board a flight to South Africa when I realized that my passport was missing. And so I frantically searched through my bags, nothing, searched again, nothing. I finally retraced my steps through the airport and found it lying on the floor. Yes, exactly. So just like that, my day went from awful to great. I was relieved and so happy. And that's how we feel when we recover something that's important. Relieved, overjoyed. And Jesus explained that's how God feels when a sinner turns to him. God is so happy, in fact, that he celebrates with a party that all of heaven joins in. So Jesus' first two stories about a lost sheep and a lost coin prepared his audience for his third story about a father and his sons. So we're going to read from Luke chapter 15. If you need a Bible, you'll find one underneath the seat in front of you. The words will be on screen behind me as well. Luke is pretty close to the end of the Bible, and it's in a part called the New Testament. So you might find Matthew, Mark, then Luke. Luke chapter 15, and we're going to start at verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." He was lost, now he's found. We have to celebrate. The father celebrating his returning son is like God rejoicing over a repentant sinner. That's the main connection that Jesus wants us to make. But there's more, because Jesus tells this story in 2 acts, and each act focuses on a different son who is lost to the Father. Jesus is showing us that there are 2 ways to be lost: by rule breaking and by rule keeping. So let's look at each of these acts in 3 scenes: lost, loved, and found. In every scene, keep your eye on the Father, the hero who loves his boys. So Act 1 opens with the younger son, Junior, saying to his father, "Give me my share of the estate." He was basically saying, "Dad, I've been waiting for you to die so I can get your stuff, but you just won't die. So let's pretend you're dead and I'll be out of here." It was so shockingly horrible. Everyone in the crowd, sinners and Pharisees, would have gasped. No one talked to a father like this. And they all would have agreed Junior was a bad kid who deserved to be punished. In that culture, he could have been thrown into jail. But the father's response was even more surprising because he did what his son asked. He divided the estate. This would have meant selling prized livestock and getting rid of fields that had been in the family for generations. It was painful and costly. And the father gave Junior his share, and the son took his money and left for a distant land. This is a place where no one would know him, no one would be watching, no one would cramp his style. And Junior partied his way through his cash. Everything that his dad had worked for was poof, gone to fund a wild lifestyle. Then a severe famine hit, and he was in trouble. So Junior hired himself out. Jesus uses a word here that means join. The son joined himself to a citizen of that country. The sense is that he was kind of clinging on to this Gentile citizen, desperate for help. And it seems that the Gentile was kind of trying to get rid of him by giving him a job that no one wanted: looking after pigs. And for Jews, this was an especially bad job because pigs were religiously unclean. So Jesus, the master storyteller, piled it on. Junior was so hungry, he even wanted to eat with the pigs. So at this point, the audience was disgusted and maybe a bit pleased. Served Junior right. The son was now cut off from his family, his community, and God. He was a lost cause. Maybe you can identify with the rule-breaking son this morning. You've had little time for God. You've lived life on your own terms. Maybe you've even hit bottom and lost your job or reputation, friends or family. You may even be afraid to come to church, convinced that God couldn't possibly welcome you. And so Jesus tells this story for you. Act 1, Scene 2, loved. So finally, Junior came to his senses and realized that even his dad's servants were better off than he was, so he hatched a plan. Listen to him in verse 18. "I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" It's quite a speech. It sounds contrite, but Jewish scholar Amy Jill Levine notes that Jesus' audience would have heard the echo of Pharaoh's empty words spoken to make the plague stop. Here's what Pharaoh said to Moses in Exodus: "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you." And scholars suggest that by putting unrepentant Pharaoh's words in the younger son's mouth, we're supposed to wonder, is he really sorry? Or does he just have a strategy to go back to dad, sound religious, get hired as a servant, and earn his way back? So on top of everything else, he's insulted his dad, he's squandered his inheritance, he's been looking after pigs. This guy may not even be all that sorry. The listening crowd would have expected his father to reject, possibly punish this no-good son when he returned. He did not deserve a welcome. Jesus continued in verse 20, "But while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with suspicion, disappointment, contempt, anger. No, he was filled with compassion. The father had been looking for his son, scanning the horizon, hoping he would come home. And when he saw him, he started running towards his boy, perhaps so excited he couldn't wait 1 second longer. Or maybe he ran there because he just had to get there before anyone else could. Commentator Kenneth Bailey explains that when a son behaved badly enough that it brought shame on the family, the community could hold a ceremony called a kezazah ceremony. And so they would take a large pot, they would smash it, and this was kind of a symbol of who this boy was to them. He was broken, he was irredeemable. And then they would shout something like, "You are cut off from your people." It was the complete rejection that a lost son deserved. And so maybe this father ran to save the son from more humiliation and rejection. See, respected older men in that culture did not run. Running involved hitching up robes and exposing the legs, and that was shameful. And this father does not care. He's willing to humiliate himself to rescue his son. The father threw his arms around his dirty, stinky, and questionably repentant son. He kissed him. Everyone in the crowd was thinking, gross, he's been hanging out with pigs. The son didn't even get to finish his rehearsed speech. Immediately, the father covered his filth and his shame with the best robe. And then he gave his ring. This was kind of like the family credit card. With a ring, the son could go anywhere at the father's expense and be treated like the father. It was a generous gift. And finally, the father put sandals on the boy's feet. Servants went barefoot. Sons wore shoes. Junior had planned to be a servant, but the father would have none of that. No matter how Junior tried to identify himself, the father said, "You're my son." And this is God's heart towards you and me. It is full of compassion. There is way more grace in God's heart than there is sin in your life. He isn't ashamed of us. He welcomes us saying, "I love you. Now get shoes on your feet and walk like a son or a daughter of the King." So the son was lost, he was loved, and now, scene 3, he was found. It was time to celebrate. And the father told his servants to kill the fattened calf. This was a special animal raised specifically for meat. During my first visit to Ghana, one of the villages welcomed me with the gift of a cow. A goat would have been generous. A cow was over the top, reserved for the grandest of occasions. Everyone in the village could be included in the feast when a cow was butchered. There was enough meat for everyone. And so that's the kind of over-the-top party that the father hosted. His son was lost, now he's found. Being found meant he was restored as a son, robe, rings, sandals. He was welcomed at the father's table. Being found meant that he was reconciled to his father, his community, and his family. Or was he? This brings us to Act 2, which is the real punchline of the story. Now, the rule-keeping older brother steps on stage. And this older brother had dutifully played the part of a respectable son. No wild living for him. He had worked on his father's estate, following the instructions to manage fields and herds. He was responsible, which is probably why he was out in the field when Junior came home. And as the older son came close to the house, he heard the sound of a party, music, dancing. Baffled, he asked a servant what was going on. Now that's interesting. So he was managing his dad's estate, but he completely missed what his dad was doing. The most precious animal they owned, the fattened calf, had just been butchered without him knowing. Trust me, butchering a cow is not an event that's easily hidden. This son was so preoccupied with carrying out his father's instructions, he'd missed knowing what was going on in his father's heart. He cared more for what his dad provided for him than he did about his dad. And when the older brother learned that the party was for his younger brother, he was angry. Junior had embarrassed the whole family. How could dad accept him at all, let alone welcome him with a party? As the elder brother, he was expected to represent his father, taking a leadership role at important occasions. So he should have been co-hosting the celebration party with his dad, but he refused to even go in and eat, insulting not only his brother, but his dad. Now the crowd around Jesus would have been uneasy. It seemed that the responsible, rule-keeping brother was just as disrespectful of his father as the irresponsible, rule-breaking son. It got worse. The elder brother publicly lectured his dad when he came to find him, shockingly rude. And his unrehearsed speech revealed a heart that had none of his dad's compassion. Inside, the elder brother was full of resentment, entitlement, and judgment. Resentment. He told his dad in verse 29, "I've been slaving for you." Slaving? That's how he describes their relationship, like a master and a slave. So instead of being grateful that he was a privileged son who got to partner with his father, he pitied himself as a slave who had to work for his father. He resented his dad and his instructions. Entitlement. "I never disobeyed your orders, but you didn't even give me a young goat." He'd been carefully keeping the rules, expecting a reward. He felt his father owed him approval and love because of his good behavior. He lived as if his place as a son depended on his obedience. And then judgment. "This son of yours," notice he calls Junior your son, not my brother. He's not going to associate with him. "This son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes, and you killed the fattened calf." Judgment just oozes out of him. He points a finger at his younger brother's obvious rebellion and at the father's reckless welcome. The rule-keeping son had been lost to the father all along. He was more interested in his dad's stuff than he was in his dad, just like his younger brother. Rule-breaking sin, like the younger brothers, is usually obvious to us. It's harder to spot the stealthier, rule-keeping kind of sin. Rule keepers are well-behaved. They'll be volunteering in the community, serving on not-for-profit boards, attending church, and yes, preaching on Sunday mornings. But there are some signs that rule-keeping is shading our lives. Resentment. Instead of being grateful for God's love for us, we can resent others who are more successful, especially if they're rule breakers. Or maybe we're secretly glad when a sinner hits bottom like we think they deserve. Entitled. We expect that God will bless us because of our good efforts. For example, we might assume that our volunteering and generosity will mean God's going to give us that perfect family or that amazing job we want. Or the reverse, when life gets hard, we worry, maybe we missed something, maybe we skipped reading the Bible for a day and God is punishing us. Judgmental, this one's a giveaway. We don't see ourselves as sinners who have been rescued by God's love. We feel superior to another person or group of people, conservatives, liberals, evangelicals, Catholics, the wealthy, the unemployed. I realized this week I can get judgmental of people I think are judgmental. Yeah. And Jesus told this story for lost rule keepers like us too. Because like the elder brother, we are equally lost and equally loved. The father's response to the resentful older boy was the same as with the younger brother: compassion. Hearing that his eldest refused to come to the party, the father went out to him. He was seeking for him, looking for him. That was a job for a servant to do, not a father. But just like with the younger son, the father didn't care about his reputation. He just had to get to his son. And he pleaded with his older son to join them. He was humble and tender with his earnest, rule-keeping son. He loved him not because of his behavior, but because he was his son. And he gently reminded the elder brother, "You're always with me, and everything that I have is yours." He didn't say, "If you obey me, I'll bless you with what's mine." There were no conditions or holdbacks. He was saying, "You're my son right now, and it's all yours right now. Just come back to the table." This is the heart of the Father towards us: reckless love. There is nothing we can do to earn his love, and there is nothing we can do to lose it. He just wants us at the table with him. The rule-keeping older son was lost. He was loved, but was he found? Being found would mean living as the son he actually was, not as the slave he imagined he was. It would mean realizing that his seat at the table was only ever assured because of the Father's love, not because of his performance. Being found would mean being reconciled with his brother, also there because of the Father's love. It would mean celebrating the family reunion. Remember who Jesus told this story for? The rule-keeping Pharisees who had wondered, "Jesus, why are those people, the sinners, eating a meal with you?" And with this story, Jesus was asking them, "Why aren't you?" The story just ends there. What does the older brother do? Does he join or stay outside? Does the younger brother behave differently from now on? The unfinished ending is an invitation to us to find ourselves in the story. So, two sons, a rule breaker and a rule keeper, both lost, both loved, both invited to be found at the Father's table. And so as we conclude, where are you in the story? And what is Jesus inviting you into today? Is there an invitation to return? Do you feel more like the rule-breaking younger son? You've made some bad choices, hurt some people, lived for yourself? If so, are you ready to turn to the God who loves you, who wants you close? So much so that in the person of Jesus, he came running towards you, and his arms stretched out wide on the cross are open to welcome you as his child, beloved son or daughter. If you're ready to choose life with Jesus, please talk with the person you came with today, or this would be brave, come forward in a minute and someone will pray with you. Is the invitation to reconcile? Do you feel more like the rule-keeping older son? Have you discovered resentment lurking in parts of your heart? Is there someone you've judged and held at a distance? If so, please tell this to the God who loves you. Listen to him pleading with you to accept and welcome someone you've been secretly judging. Making a move to forgive and reconcile can be hard. Please pray about this with someone, either with a friend nearby or by coming forward in a moment. Is the invitation today to join Jesus in looking for someone who's lost? Who in your life is far from God? Can you be praying for them this week, asking the Holy Spirit to wake them up to God's love? Is there a place for you to have a coffee with them, have them over for a meal, invite them to church on Easter Sunday? As God's beloved children, let's return to our compassionate Father, be reconciled to one another, and join him in searching for the sons and daughters he wants to see restored at his table. I'm going to pray now. We'll sing a song, and if you'd like prayer, just come forward. Father, thank you for your reckless love of us. Thank you that you came running towards us in the person of Jesus, that you endured shame so that we would not have that. Thank you that you welcome us no matter where we're coming from. no matter what's been going on in our lives, in our hearts. And so, Jesus, I ask that we would hear your voice this morning. If there is anyone here who needs to know you in their life, that you would make that clear to them, that your invitation to them would be compelling, that they would know your love. If there's someone here this morning you're putting a finger on a relationship that needs to be restored, or a place of judgment in our hearts, would you too help them to know your love, redemption, your restoration? Would you go with us as we head into the week and enable us to be those who walk as your sons and daughters? In Jesus' name, amen.